In the heart of the Bavarian countryside, nestled among the dense forests and towering mountains, stood an ancient castle shrouded in mystery. For centuries, whispers of its haunting past echoed through the land, tales of ghostly apparitions and chilling encounters that sent shivers down the spines of even the bravest souls. But among all the legends, none struck fear into the hearts of the locals quite like the legend of the werewolf. It was said that on nights when the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, the beast would prowl the surrounding woods, its howls cutting through the darkness like a knife. Some claimed to have seen it, a monstrous creature with fur as black as night and eyes that burned with an otherworldly hunger. One summer night, as the moon cast its silvery glow over the castle grounds, two Italian tourists found themselves wandering the winding paths long past midnight. Ignoring the warnings of the locals, they had been drawn to the castle by its enigmatic allure, eager to uncover its secrets for themselves. But as they wandered deeper into the forest, a sense of unease settled over them like a thick fog, and they quickened their pace, eager to return to the safety of their inn. It was then that they heard it, a low growl that seemed to emanate from the shadows themselves. Frozen in terror, they turned to face the source of the sound, their hearts pounding in their chests. And then, emerging from the darkness, came the creature they had feared above all else. Its fur was matted with blood, its eyes wild with hunger as it bared its gleaming fangs in a snarl of rage. With a primal roar, it lunged at them, its claws slashing through the air with deadly precision. Desperate to escape, the tourists fled into the night, their screams echoing through the forest as they ran for their lives. But the creature was relentless, its howls of fury echoing through the trees as it pursued its prey with unerring determination. For hours they ran, their breath coming in ragged gasps, as they struggled to outpace the beast that hunted them. As dawn began to break on the horizon, they stumbled upon a clearing bathed in the soft light of early morning. With one final burst of strength, they collapsed onto the ground, their bodies battered and bruised from their ordeal. And as they lay there, gasping for breath, they knew that they had escaped death by the narrowest of margins. But their ordeal was far from over, for as they looked up at the sky, they saw that the moon still hung full and heavy in the sky, casting its eerie light over the forest below. And as they lay there, trembling with fear, they knew that the creature that had hunted them still lurked in the shadows, waiting for another chance to strike. For in the heart of Bavaria, where ancient castles loomed like specters of the past, the legend of the werewolf lived on, a terrifying reminder of the darkness that lurked within us all. And as long as the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, the beast would continue to hunt, its hunger for blood and flesh insatiable and unrelenting. As the sun rose higher in the sky, casting its golden rays over the forest, the Italian tourists struggled to their feet, their bodies aching from the night's ordeal. With trembling hands, they clung to each other, seeking solace in the warmth of their shared terror. But as they looked around, they realized that they were not alone. For standing at the edge of the clearing, silhouetted against the morning light, was a figure unlike any they had ever seen before. Tall and imposing, with eyes that gleamed with an otherworldly light, the stranger seemed to radiate an aura of power and menace. And as he stepped forward into the clearing, his gaze fixed on the tourists with an intensity that sent shivers down their spines. "Do not be afraid," he said, his voice low and resonant. "I mean you no harm." But despite his words, the tourists could not shake the feeling of unease that gripped them. For there was something about the stranger that seemed off, something in the way he moved, with a grace and fluidity that was more animal than human. "You are lucky to be alive," the stranger continued, his gaze never leaving theirs. "The creature that hunts these woods is no ordinary beast. It is a werewolf, cursed to roam the night in search of prey." The tourists exchanged fearful glances, their minds reeling at the revelation. Werewolves were creatures of myth and legend, the stuff of nightmares, whispered about around campfires and in darkened taverns. And yet, here they stood, face to face with one of the creatures themselves. "But why did it attack us?" one of the tourists asked, his voice trembling with fear. The stranger's lips curled into a grim smile. "Werewolves are creatures of instinct, driven by the primal urge to hunt and kill. It is in their nature to seek out prey, especially on nights when the moon hangs full and bright in the sky." "But why are you telling us this?" the other tourist demanded, his voice tinged with suspicion. The stranger's smile widened, revealing a row of gleaming teeth that seemed unnaturally sharp. "Because I can help you," he said, his voice low and hypnotic. I can teach you how to defend yourselves against the werewolf, to harness the power that lies dormant within you and use it to defeat your enemy." The tourists exchanged wary glances, unsure of whether to trust the stranger's words, but as they looked into his eyes, they saw something there that filled them with a glimmer of hope. Something that told them that perhaps, against all odds, they might just stand a chance against the creature that hunted them. And so, with hearts heavy with fear and uncertainty, they followed the stranger into the depths of the forest, ready to face whatever horrors lay ahead. For in the heart of Bavaria, where ancient castles loomed and werewolves roamed, the battle for survival had only just begun. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the air grew thick with the scent of pine and damp earth. The stranger led them along winding paths and hidden trails, his movements swift and sure as he navigated the dense undergrowth with ease. But as they walked, the tourists couldn't shake the feeling of unease that gnawed at the edges of their minds. Who was this stranger, and why had he appeared to them in their hour of need? And more importantly, could they trust him to lead them to safety, or was he leading them into an even greater danger? Their doubts only grew stronger as they reached a clearing deep in the heart of the forest, where the trees loomed tall and menacing on all sides. There, in the center of the clearing, stood a circle of ancient stones, weathered and worn with age. "This is the place," the stranger said, his voice low and solemn, "the place where the power of the werewolf is strongest." The tourists exchanged wary glances, their hearts pounding in their chests. They had come this far, driven by a desperate need to survive, but now they found themselves faced with a choice that could mean the difference between life and death. "Do you trust me?" the stranger asked, his eyes burning with an intensity that sent shivers down their spines. For a long moment, the tourists hesitated, their minds racing with fear and uncertainty. But then, with a shared glance and a silent nod, they made their decision. "We trust you," they said, their voices trembling but resolute. The stranger nodded, a fierce glint of determination in his eyes. "Good. Then listen carefully, for what I am about to teach you could mean the difference between life and death." And so, under the watchful eye of the stranger, the tourists began their training. They learned to harness the power of the forest, drawing strength from the earth beneath their feet and the whispering wind that danced through the trees. They practiced the ancient arts of combat, honing their skills with blade and bow until their movements flowed as smoothly as water. But as the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into months, the tourists couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. Everywhere they went, they felt the eyes of unseen predators upon them, lurking in the shadows just beyond the edge of their vision. And then, one fateful night, as the moon hung full and heavy in the sky, their worst fears were realized. For as they made their way through the forest, their senses on high alert, they heard it. The low, guttural growl that sent a chill down their spines and set their hearts racing with fear. The werewolf had found them. With a primal roar, it emerged from the darkness, its eyes burning with an unholy light as it bared its gleaming fangs in a snarl of rage. But this time, the tourists were ready. With weapons drawn and hearts filled with courage, they faced their enemy head-on, ready to fight for their lives with every ounce of strength they possessed. But as the battle raged on, they soon realized that the werewolf was unlike any foe they had ever faced. It was faster, stronger, and more relentless than they could have ever imagined, its claws tearing through their defenses with deadly precision. And as they fought for their lives beneath the light of the full moon, they knew that their struggle was far from over. For in the heart of Bavaria, where ancient castles loomed and werewolves roamed, the battle for survival had only just begun. As the tourists fought desperately against the ferocious werewolf, their weapons clashing against its impenetrable hide, they began to realize the true extent of their peril. Despite their training and newfound skills, they were no match for the primal fury of the creature that hunted them. With each passing moment, the werewolf seemed to grow stronger, its snarls of rage echoing through the forest like a harbinger of doom. Its claws tore through the air with savage precision, leaving deep gouges in the earth and sending splinters of wood flying in all directions. But even as they faced the prospect of certain death, the tourists refused to give up hope. With a fierce determination born of desperation, they continued to fight, their hearts pounding in their chests as they sought out any weakness in their enemy's defenses. And then, just when it seemed that all hope was lost, they saw it. A glimmer of silver in the moonlight, nestled among the creature's tangled fur. With a surge of adrenaline, they realized what they had to do. Working together with the precision born of desperation, they launched a coordinated attack, aiming for the one vulnerable spot on the werewolf's body. With each strike of their weapons, they drew closer and closer to their target, until finally, with a triumphant cry, they drove their blades deep into the creature's heart. For a moment, time seemed to stand still as they watched the werewolf falter, its eyes widening in shock and disbelief. And then, with a final, guttural roar, it collapsed to the ground, its lifeblood pooling beneath it in a dark, viscous puddle. Exhausted but victorious, the tourists stood over the fallen beast, their chests heaving with exertion as they surveyed the scene before them. They had done it. They had defeated the werewolf and lived to tell the tale. But even as they caught their breath and tended to their wounds, they knew that their ordeal was far from over. For in the heart of Bavaria, where ancient castles loomed and werewolves roamed, there would always be new threats waiting in the shadows, ready to test their courage and determination to their very limits. And so, with a wary eye cast over their shoulders and their weapons at the ready, they continued on their journey, knowing that whatever dangers lay ahead, they would face them together, as allies forged in the fires of adversity. For in the end, it was not the strength of their weapons or the skill of their training that had saved them, but the strength of their bond and the courage of their hearts. And as long as they stood together, they knew that nothing could ever truly defeat them. As the tourists caught their breath after defeating the werewolf, a heavy silence descended upon the forest, broken only by the rustling of leaves and the distant call of a night bird. Their hearts still racing with adrenaline, they exchanged relieved glances, their eyes reflecting the shared relief of surviving the harrowing ordeal. But as they turned to leave the clearing, a sudden chill swept through the air, causing them to pause in their tracks. It was as if the very fabric of the forest had shifted, the shadows growing darker and more menacing with each passing moment. Unease settled over the tourists once more as they exchanged wary glances, the hairs on the back of their necks standing on end. Something was not right. They could feel it in their bones. And then, from the depths of the forest, came a sound that sent a shiver down their spines. A low, mournful howl that seemed to echo through the trees, filling the air with a sense of foreboding that was almost palpable. "It can't be," one of the tourists whispered, their voice barely audible above the eerie wail of the wind. But even as they spoke, they knew the truth. The werewolf they had defeated was not alone. There were others out there, lurking in the darkness, waiting for their chance to strike. With a sinking feeling in the pits of their stomachs, the tourists realized that their ordeal was far from over. They had defeated one werewolf, yes, but there were others out there, hungry for revenge and thirsting for blood. And so, with a shared glance and a silent nod, they prepared themselves for the battle to come. They knew that they would need all of their strength and courage if they were to survive the night, for in the heart of Bavaria, where ancient castles loomed and werewolves roamed, the fight for survival was never truly over. With weapons drawn and hearts filled with determination, they ventured deeper into the forest, ready to face whatever horrors awaited them in the darkness. For they knew that as long as they stood together, they would always be stronger than the creatures that hunted them. And as the moon cast its silvery light over the forest, illuminating the path ahead, they marched onward into the night, their spirits unbowed and their resolve unshakable. For in the end, it was not the strength of their weapons or the ferocity of their enemies that would determine their fate, but the strength of their will and the depth of their courage. And as long as they held fast to those, they knew that they would never truly be defeated. As the tourists ventured deeper into the forest, their footsteps echoing through the darkness, they remained ever vigilant, their senses on high alert for any sign of danger. But despite their best efforts, they soon found themselves overwhelmed by the relentless onslaught of the werewolves that hunted them. With each passing moment, their numbers dwindled, their ranks thinning as they fell one by one to the savage fury of their enemies. And as the moon hung high in the sky, casting its eerie light over the forest below, the tourists knew that their time was running out. In the end, they fought bravely, their weapons flashing in the darkness as they struggled to hold back the tide of death that threatened to consume them. But it was not enough. In the end, they were no match for the ferocity of the werewolves that hunted them, their bodies torn and broken as they fell beneath the onslaught. And as the last of them breathed their final breaths, their blood staining the forest floor crimson, a heavy silence descended upon the clearing, broken only by the mournful howls of the creatures that had brought about their demise. For in the heart of Bavaria, where ancient castles loomed and werewolves roamed, the battle for survival had ended in tragedy. And as the moon slowly sank below the horizon, casting the forest into darkness once more, the spirits of the fallen tourists watched over their shattered bodies with sadness and regret. For they had fought bravely, yes, but in the end, it had not been enough to save them from the cruel fate that awaited them in the depths of the forest. And as their spirits faded into the night, carried away on the wings of the wind, they knew that they would never be forgotten, their tale forever etched into the annals of history as a warning of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. And so, in the heart of Bavaria, where ancient castles loomed and werewolves roamed, the forest stood silent and still, its secrets hidden away beneath a blanket of darkness that would never again be disturbed.